So these clips you have just seen are not from tutorial segments. Some aren't even from the first half of the game. They instead showcase the typical quote-unquote gameplay you will find in Spider-Man 2. But let's get the controversial title out of the way first. I'm not trying to convince you or anyone to change your mind about Spider-Man 2. If you played it and you liked it, that's great. Why we personally like or don't like a game comes mostly down to the question, do I like the good parts of this game, and can I overlook the bad parts of it? I, for example, really like Crackdown 3. I like the and can excuse the repetitiveness and mediocre presentation. If you told me it's not that great, I would agree with you, but I would still tell you that I like it. Now with that out of the way, let's get into the meat of things. Why am I claiming that Spider-Man 2 is a badly designed game? Well, let's ask another question first. When does a game stop being a game and starts being a guided tour where the developers just hold your hand and drag you along? When do they ruin any immersion or interesting gameplay moments the player could have by constantly reminding them that all they're doing is pressing buttons, and not because they're intuitively pressing them in the moment, but because the developers just can't stop telling them exactly what to press and what to do next at all times? To me, Spider-Man 2 has 3 standout issues. All 3 of these are deeply interlinked. One issue causes the next, which causes the next, and so on. The end result of these issues is a low amount of player agency. Player agency describes the amount of control, freedom, and meaningful choices the player has at any given point while playing the game. An extreme example of low player agency would be a narrow corridor, a single enemy, and the only input the player has access to is a menu option that says attack enemy. After clicking, your character automatically runs over, does a set of attack animations, the enemy dies, and the level is over. This would be an unrealistically extreme example of low player agency, but it shows what it means. In this extreme scenario, I don't have direct control over my character. I have only a single meaningful choice, and there's no strategy or in-the-moment decision-making. You wouldn't want to play an entire game that is set up this way, would you? A real example of extremely high player agency would be a game like Breath of the Wild, a game where the only goal you have to complete after the tutorial is over is to go to the castle and defeat the final boss, aka Ganon. How you go about defeating him, how you prepare for that battle, where you want to go first, how many quests you want to complete, how many shrines you want to beat in order to become stronger, how many beasts you want to tame in order to unlock powerful abilities, all of that is up to you to decide. Breath of the Wild gives you an enormous amount of player agency. Spider-Man 2, however, lands really low on the player agency scale. And the 3 reasons why are: 1. The lack and the sidelining of core mechanics in favor of context-sensitive interactions. 2. The absolutely awful level design that results out of this. And 3. The constant handholding that leads to you, the player, never having to use your brain even slightly. Combine all 3 of these, and you get the low player agency that I'm talking about. So what are core mechanics, and how is Spider-Man 2 lacking in them and ignoring them? Core mechanics in Spider-Man 2, for example, are simple things like walking, sprinting, jumping, zipping onto walls, and even simpler things like being able to let go of the wall by pressing circle. The issue, however, in Spider-Man 2 is that all mechanics, from the simple ones to the more imaginative ones, go largely ignored the moment you start the mission. And yes, even pressing circle to let go of walls will be ignored or even replaced. While in the open world, they all are available to you, and they do serve some purpose. During missions, that changes. The mechanics like zipping onto walls I mentioned before will only ever come into play in stealth sections. Or at least it would come into play if it wasn't for this new mechanic, the webline, which is basically a cheat code for all the stealth sections and which you get relatively early in the game. Shoot your webline from nearly anywhere to nearly any target. Walk over, wait for the text to tell you that it's safe to press square, and then take people out one by one. So the webline makes all mechanics and strategies that would be used in stealth sections completely irrelevant. One of these now irrelevant mechanics is hanging down from a ceiling. Why do that when you have the webline, which will also get you above the enemy? And even distracting enemies becomes mostly ignorable the moment you unlock the double zipline takedown, which allows you to take down 2 enemies that are next to each other at once, eliminating most situations where luring one enemy away would be needed. During missions, all web-swinging related things become irrelevant as well. These cool jump and dash moves, or the corner swing, they look cool, but they are useless during missions. Just swing normally and you will be fine. The unlockable loop you can do is also nonsensical. The time it takes for you to do it is not worth the small speed boost you get from it. And during missions you will never think, maybe I should use my loop to gain an advantage. Therefore, once again, it's useless during meaningful gameplay moments. These mechanics are only there to have a bit of fun during open world traversal, which is fine, but it won't add interesting gameplay moments. The swinging in general is so automated that you never really feel in control while using it. How automated, you ask? Well, let's see what happens if I hold my left stick forward and hold down R2. I'm recording this using remote play, hence the Xbox controller overlay, but you get the idea. Notice how I never move my stick even slightly away from the forward position, how I don't press any other buttons, and how I never let go of R2. You see Spidey do jumps, wall runs, sidewards and upwards. He jumps off while doing wall runs. He even zips around edges. All while I simply hold down 2 inputs, stick forward and R2. If I taped down my stick and trigger, I could do this without even being in the same room as my controller. And I'm not asking for a complex swinging system. You can do a lot with a very small amount of buttons. Look no further than Insomniac's own game, Sunset Overdrive. In this game, the A button lets you jump, pull yourself up ledges, and if you time it right, will let you bounce higher on objects like these. And with the X button, you do stunts like grinding, hanging from power lines, pulling yourself up. Combo that with the A button, you do a high jump. You can swing from horizontal beams, wall run, and surf on water. All of these with only 2 buttons. The difference between this game and Spider-Man 2 is that here you have to actually know what you're doing. You have to time your button presses, keep the environment in mind, and manually move your character to achieve any of this. If I want to wall run around corners, for example, I also have to be aware of my surroundings and press the X button just in time. Otherwise, I will run straight off the wall, which of course also has its own advantages. Not only that, but contrary to Spider-Man 2, the traversal system here is also an integral part of the game's main gameplay, as you are rewarded for switching up your stunts and for always staying in motion, all while shooting enemies and dodging their attacks. If you do combos while fighting, you'll fill this meter here, which activates bonus perks like explosions while bouncing, shooting fireballs with your melee attack, doing electricity damage while rolling, or spewing fire while grinding. You unlock more of these BAMs, as they are called, along the way, and you can switch them out on the fly. So not only is the traversal in Sunset Overdrive more involved and not automated, it also is an integral part of the mission design. The same cannot be said about Spider-Man 2, where the swinging is at best used in the most basic form to follow a slow-moving enemy a handful of times. A completely underutilized set of mechanics. Or how about this charge jump? All this one really does is give you a height boost while traversing the open world. It's also never something needed during any mission. At most you might use it during combat to jump away from an enemy. The combat, however, is so easy that I doubt you will ever need that. During combat, the most effective strategy is also the easiest. Just hover in the air, pull people towards you, and mash square. Repeat until all enemies are gone. The only reason to ever do something other than this is either if you are forced to because of enemies like these big dudes, or because you get bored. In summary, most core mechanics will never give you any advantage during action moments, and will never be used by the developers for interesting game design moments. You would think some of them would be great mechanics to create some interesting moments, where the player has to think for a moment and then use Spidey's mechanics to overcome an obstacle, but they are never used that way. What am I talking about? Well, for example, imagine if these fire escape stairs would be deadly obstacles, and I wouldn't need to get to the other side or the other end of this wall. In such a moment, a mechanic like jumping off of walls and zipping onto walls would add some interesting moments to a mission. Or maybe if these walls here were covered in deadly spikes and I had to get up to that platform up there. But I can't reach it with my wall zipping mechanic. Here I could take advantage of my charge jump and then combine it with my wall zip to overcome a challenge. Or what if this tunnel here was electrified all around and you can't touch it, but you have to get to the door at the end of it? Maybe one player would come up with the idea to use a new wing gliding to skillfully glide through. And yet another player might find that using the web line would be a good approach. So now we even have multiple mechanics and strategies to overcome an obstacle. But even moments like these ones, which I made up spontaneously while swinging around the city, and which are as basic as it gets, are more complex usages of the mechanics involved than anything you will ever find in any mission of Spider-Man 2. So what do you do then during missions, if no mechanics are used at all? Well, let's go into my second point, which was the awful level design and mission design. Level and mission design is simply how a level or mission is laid out. Good level design gives the player interesting challenges, interesting choices, and uses the game's mechanics in increasingly imaginative and increasingly challenging ways. As I said, none of this is happening in Spider-Man 2. If you played a level from the first 2 hours of the game, or a level from the last 2 hours of the game, you wouldn't be able to tell the difference mechanically or in how challenging it is. In a typical mission in Spider-Man 2, all you really do is follow direct instructions, like following a yellow marker, and pressing buttons that you are being told to press by the developers through prompts that pop up on screen. The only time you, the player, have to make any decisions on your own is during combat and stealth segments. As I already showed, both of these are extremely simplistic and require no real skill or strategy in 90% of cases. The exceptions are mostly the boss battles. During combat, pull people towards you and punch them. Alternatively, you can hover above a deep drop, pull them towards you, and just let them drop down, instantly defeating them. And as I also already said, during stealth, the new webline gadget you get early in the game will make any other strategy to stealth through the levels completely irrelevant. But let me show you how extremely overpowered the webline is. Look how many lines I can shoot with this thing. It's ridiculous. You can shoot them on nearly anything from nearly anywhere. The easiest strategy is the fastest and most effective one, even on the highest difficulty setting. The rest of the level/mission design consists purely of you following direct orders. Not a single meaningful choice can be made by the player. If Breath of the Wild was the equivalent of an art teacher telling you to draw something nice and give you a full set of professional pencils to do it, then Spider-Man 2 in comparison would be a color-by-numbers book that comes with 4 colors. This here is the tutorial area of Breath of the Wild. Your only instruction is to visit 4 shrines. One of them is on top of this hill, but between me and it is a gap. This early in the game, my stamina isn't good enough to climb over there, and I also don't have my glider yet. So how do I get there? Well, you can walk to the right and go up the hill. Through the snow, but he just came out of cryosleep naked and only found rudimentary clothes, so we can't just run through the cold. This is why the game naturally teaches you how useful cooking can be. There are these peppers here, so I collect them, clear the enemy hideout, use their fire to light this torch I found, and then use that to light the fire below the cooking spot. Then I cook some nice stew. Eat it. And now I can run through the cold. And reach the shrine. Notice how nothing I did was something that I was ordered to do. I did all of this through my own decisions. But we can also do it another way. I notice there are a lot of trees here, and the old man is chopping them down. So now I'm thinking, can I do this too? So I look for an axe, and where are axes typically? Well, in wooden huts, of course. And look, there's one right there. And indeed, there's an axe in the little hut. We take the axe, chop down a tree, and we mess it up. But no stress. There are 2 more trees we can try our luck on. But we also mess up the second one. Damn it. But this time, we line it up just right. And we did it. We built a bridge. A Just FYI, I messed up the first 2 trees just to show you that none of this is scripted, and all of it is powered by the game's core mechanics and systemic interactions. But now we still have to make sure to not fall down while going across, because you can indeed fall down here. And then going up this mountain, we have to conserve our still limited stamina while using these resting spots. To finally reach our shrine. Multiple different ways to accomplish our goal, and we came up with our ways to accomplish it completely on our own. The game developers elegantly teaching us core mechanics and systemic interactions on the way. This is good level design. It's masterfully designed, in fact. Now let's look at Spider-Man 2. I come into the sewers, instantly see a yellow marker, even though we are in a 100% linear corridor, and following it, we come across a fire, which is blocking our way. So how will I get in there? Will I need to find a clever way around or through it? No. The game just displays a button prompt, which triggers a context-sensitive scripted sequence when pressed. Now I walk forward, and the game automatically locks me into a crawling position. And even in this more open area here, I'm not allowed to stand back up. I can't do much, in fact. I'm currently pressing all the buttons on my controller, and everything is locked away from me, except my web shooter with R1 for some reason. How do I get out of this crawling space then? By the developers placing a sit point at an arbitrary spot. There's no other way to get out of here, and these pre-placed sit points will be a recurring theme, by the way. Now here I can't jump, swing or sprint, because now those abilities are locked away from me. And the only way forward is to press the button prompt on the pre-placed sit point. I'm not allowed to jump there myself. I have to use the sit point. And here I'm now locked to the crawling position again. I can't crawl backwards, and this time I can't even shoot. You see the HUD coming in because I'm pressing R1 currently. Seconds later, however, suddenly on this spot, I am allowed to aim with L2 and shoot with R1 again, for no apparent reason. And the only way forward is to sit to this pipe. I can't get over to this pipe in any other way. Manually jumping over is locked away from me. Now being on the pipe, I still can't jump. And the only way I can do is walk up and down the pipe. My only way forward is once again zipping to the next spot, and I'm once again not allowed to jump over there using my jump mechanic. After zipping over, I'm locked into a crawling position again, and the only things I can do is aiming and shooting. And once again, a predetermined button prompt to zip to the next zip point.
Doc?
Now I'm not allowed to go backwards. Shooting web and aiming with L2 is once again suddenly locked away from me, which is why you see the HUD popping in again. And then once again at the end, a sit point. Now I'm in a room with only one way to progress, which is this obvious crack in the wall. And it demonstrates really well how limiting this game is at all times if I show you me trying with all my might to use my core mechanics to go up this wall and into the crack. But I'm not allowed to. I cannot crawl up or sit onto the wall, neither am I allowed to jump to it, because the developers placed an invisible wall there. So the only way forward is once again the predetermined sit point, complete with button prompts. I told you they are a recurring theme. And once again I'm locked to a wall, where I'm not allowed to crawl backwards, which is why Spidey's doing this funny little twitching here. Again, all my abilities are taken away for no reason, and after crawling a few meters forward, suddenly I can aim again, and then crawl backwards again even, but only for a bit. I can't move the camera much either, and the only way out is, say it with me, to zip to the next zip point. I hope you see now what I mean when I say that this game is like a color by numbers book, right? You have to do everything the developers tell you to do, exactly the way they tell you to do it. At no point are you allowed to think on your own. At no point is the level design creative or uses any game mechanics in any interesting ways. What you saw here might come across as an extreme example, but no, I will show you more examples later. Be assured, this is not an outlier. This is the norm. So to reiterate, the level/mission design is not using the game's mechanics in any meaningful, interesting, or challenging ways. It constantly tells you exactly what to do next and restricts your movement and abilities at any opportunity it gets, which turns the entire game into a color-by-numbers book that has only a few pages, aka the combat and stealth, where you can draw freely, but are still only given a very limited number of colors that you can draw with. And this then goes fluently into our third issue, the constant handholding. The handholding is basically the default state in this game. I mean, I just showed you a mission in the game, and what did you see? You saw a yellow marker constantly telling you where to go, even though there was literally only a single linear path, and you constantly saw button prompts. Did you see a single moment where I wasn't being commanded around? No, you didn't. This handholding is a combination of the lack of mechanics being used and the bad level design. Both of these issues almost necessitate developers to constantly tell you what to do next. The level designers don't integrate your core abilities into the design, which leads to level design that is just a linear path with constant context-sensitive interactions being used as a crutch for the lack of mechanics. And because the game constantly randomly takes away abilities from you, or even gives you special abilities only in specific moments, the developers are forced to hold your hands, because you wouldn't even know what you are currently allowed to do if they didn't. For example here, this is a very late mission in the game. I'm crawling on the ceiling. Yes, I got here by the developers placing a sit point and telling me which buttons to press. How did you guess? So and how do I go down from here? Well, the two core mechanics I could use in the open world, for example, would be either to press the circle button to just let go, or to aim to the floor and sit to it. But I can't know which of these two things I'm allowed to currently use, so the developers have to tell me to press circle here. They have to hold my hand. And then, just a few moments later, I once again am placed on a wall by the devs, yes, again through a zip point, taking away all my controls, and now the developers won't let me use circle to go down to the floor below me. I'm currently mashing the circle button, and nothing happens. So the developers have to tell me to sit to the point over there. They again have to hold my hand. So now my three issues build a nice little spiral of crappiness. Core mechanics go unused. Because core mechanics go unused, the level design is restrictive and full of context-sensitive interactions, making up for the lack of mechanics. And because the levels are full of context-sensitive interactions and full of moments that take away controls from you, the game has to tell me what to press next and constantly hold my hands. And the spiral of crappiness leads to low player agency. Again, player agency is the amount of control and meaningful choices a player has while playing a game. There are no meaningful choices, because the level design is extremely linear and restrictive, and the stealth and combat are damped down, while the easiest strategies are also the best. And you also don't really have a lot of control, as the game literally takes control away from you regularly, and many of the game's mechanics are context-sensitive and partly automated. But of course, low player agency isn't always a bad thing. It's always dependent on what type of game you're talking about. Arcade games don't have a lot of player agency, but those are a completely different type of game. An arcade game needs to be easy to understand, fun, instantly, and for short bursts. You put in a coin, you shoot at zombies for 5 minutes, you move on to the next game. You put in a coin, you punch a bunch of aliens for 5 to 10 minutes, and you move on. Spider-Man 2, however, wants to be a grandiose AAA high-budget 20-plus hour action-adventure game. Coincidentally the same genre as Breath of the Wild. But if you played it in short bursts, 80% of your time would be spent following commands and doing next to nothing of any gameplay value. Even Mario Wonder, a game that can be played in short bursts and is designed with that in mind, has more player agency and interesting mechanics than Spider-Man 2. The developers don't hold your hands, and they don't tell you in plain text that these enemies can be killed by grabbing onto them. Because the developers already taught you that you can grab things, and they trust that you, the player, are clever enough to know to do this intuitively. And the level design is creatively done to entice the player to try to grab onto them. This is also why this little challenge later in the level can be presented to you by the developers without them having to explicitly tell you how to do it. And why is this? Well, because the game relies on its core mechanics and teaches them to you in intuitive and clever ways. Mario Wonder is designed like this from start to finish. Now let's look at some more missions that embody everything wrong with Spider-Man 2. This mission starts with us having to follow a yellow marker to a combat section. Of course, we can just pull everyone off the roof and move on. We do this a second time, and the third time. But of course, I have the hard choice between exploiting my air pull and stealthing and exploiting my webline. Either way is easy and brain dead, and I'm playing this on the highest difficulty here, by the way. The one that you unlock after the main game is finished. Now we reach Kraven's hideout and go in disguise. Here, of course, every ability is taken away from me again. I can't jump, I can't run, I can't sprint, or do anything except walk slowly. But it says that I have to blend in, so better not draw any attention, right? Wrong. The developer has the chance to maybe make this into an interesting stealth mission, but just said nah. I can annoy people here all I want. Even this dude, who tells me he will, quote, break my bones if I don't keep moving. The immersion is instantly broken when you notice that you can annoy him all day long and nothing will happen. So I continue using my only currently available ability and slowly walked to the next cutscene. This cutscene shows me a tranquilizer dart that can take down big animals. A good game designer could use this to give the player a hint for later. Maybe the player can keep this dart in mind and then later come back to grab it. But I'm getting ahead of myself. After the cutscene, I again slowly walk into another cutscene. I keep walking. Maybe I try to interrupt this fight. Oh no. Now I'm in trouble. The jig is up. My cover will be blown.
Okay.
But of course, nothing happens. So I keep walking, following the yellow marker. Even though this is once again only a single narrow path. Another cutscene. And now I have to find my way up to the second floor and find an elevator. Can I finally do something on my own? Will I be freed from the narrow path I'm walking on? Nope. Here comes the yellow marker and one singular narrow path. And so I keep walking. Another cutscene, some funny slapstick. And now I'm on the second floor. Right in front of me is the room that I need to go to. As I open it, yet another cutscene plays. So the person I was looking for is actually a tiger, and Spidey says I need to make him sleep. So maybe the sleeping dart. I could put the sleeping poison inside a steak, but of course, you, the player, can't come up with this simple plan on your own. Because the developers will just tell you what to do, and put down a yellow marker. But it gets worse. Remember, the spiral of crappiness is omnipresent. Systemic mechanics go unused, leading to bad level design, where they are replaced with context-sensitive nonsense. And because everything is context-sensitive nonsense, the developers have to constantly hold your hand and tell you which buttons to press next. Up until now, I couldn't use any of my abilities after all. I couldn't even use my normal movement speed. So how can I know which abilities I'm now allowed to use? I cannot. So the developers tell me what to use and where to go. First, Spider-Man will remind me what I have to do, and then that I have to move, because I would have never thought of that on my own, of course. So I go up to the chandelier. And the very moment I'm on that chandelier, the game tells me in plain text which of my gadgets I have to use next. It literally tells me in text to use my webline. And I'm not allowed to come up with an alternative method, like maybe sitting onto the ceiling and lowering myself down from there, because that would mean core mechanics would be finally used, in interesting ways even, and we can't have that. And I also was not allowed to come up with the intended method, the one with the zipline, on my own. But of course, I couldn't have even known that I was allowed to use the webline, and I have to make it clear that this is not a tutorial for the webline. The webline tutorial happened multiple missions ago, so I have no choice but to once more do what the developers tell me to do. But I, and by that I mean Spider-Man, notices that there is a hunter right next to the stake. How can I get it without him noticing? Well, the developers of course tell me how. They say I need to press R3 to scan for objects to distract him with. Again, this is not a tutorial, this is hours into the game. Distracting enemies was introduced hours earlier. After I scan for objects, the game then also tells me which buttons to use in order to shoot my web at the objects. And I'm once more reminding you and making clear that this is not a tutorial. This is hours after all of these mechanics were taught to me in dedicated tutorials. This is every goddamn mission in this goddamn game. They all do this. Press this, do that, press this, follow yellow marker, press that, hold this, every single time. No thinking and no player agency allowed. After distracting him, the developers show me a final button prompt to pull up the stake. And now, remember the dart with the sleeping poison? In a game with player agency and strong core mechanics, the developers would trust their players to remember that dart and then come to the conclusion to get it by themselves, especially in an action-adventure. But of course, we are again presented by a yellow marker instead. And once we arrive at the marker, guess what happens next? So, other developers often introduce a concept with an easy version first, and then build on that concept by introducing harder versions of it the further you go, while adding interesting twists to the concept along the way. But what does Insomniac do? Clearly, there are again hunters next to the thing that I need to get, right? And I just learned that I can distract them by scanning for and shooting at objects around them. I am being presented with the same concept again. Will Insomniac build on it by making it more challenging and giving it an interesting twist? Well, of course not. Of course they don't. But how bad is it? Well, so bad that the developers once again tell me to press R3 to scan for objects and distract the enemy. They tell me in plain text to do the exact same thing I just did again. And as you can see, without any interesting twist. In fact, this version of the concept is almost a devolved version of the last one instead of an evolved one, like you would expect if it was a well-designed game. But maybe it will become more interesting after I distracted the enemy. Maybe now I have to use my hang from the ceiling ability to lower myself down and get the dart. But will they let me come up with this on my own? Or will they tell me which buttons to press next in order to lower myself down? Well, neither of the two. Of course it's neither. You should have known this by now. What actually happens is that the game shows me where I have to go to, and once I go there, a button prompt will trigger a cutscene. Hilariously, in this cutscene that plays, Spidey actually does hang down from the ceiling. You know, just like I could have done. But instead, I had to follow orders and watch a cutscene. After I got the dart, or after he got the dart in the cutscene, I follow a yellow marker. Because I would have never found my way back to the tiger on my own. Of course not. The tiger is now sleeping, and I have almost all my abilities taken away again, only being able to slowly walk and aim. I go to these dots and press the button prompts the developers tell me to press, and then repeat this until another cutscene plays. And this is then followed by combat. You saw it, you are never allowed to think on your own. They even fake puzzle elements, like this one with MJ. First of all, the game has to tell us each time how to get through these cracks, because it's not a core mechanic. Of course it's not. But let's look at the fake puzzle I'm talking about. Here, I have to find a key code. It's somewhere here. But where can it be? Spoiler, it's right here under this piece of cloth on this whiteboard. I am of course not allowed to find this on my own, because that would go against the spiral of crappiness, remember? There is no core mechanic or systemic interaction to put on a piece of cloth after all. So instead I have to follow orders again.
Come on, who doesn't write down their passwords?
Oh, a surprise quick-time event, how thrilling! And after I mashed the button, the game told me to mash back to following the dots. I press buttons the developers tell me to press, go to the next one, press what they tell me to press, and so on. Then I trigger a cutscene. And after the cutscene has finished, I'm now allowed to find the codes. And if you thought, at least during MJ missions, I'm not randomly losing abilities, given that the only abilities she has is sprint, stealth kill, and throwing rocks, you are wrong. Here I cannot throw rocks. But here I can. Cannot. Can. Cannot. Can. Amazing. Or how about this fake puzzle? I knocked out everyone, and now I need to get in here. I need a key. Well, this puzzle consists of me being told which buttons to press again. This is not a core mechanic, so the developers have to tell me I'm allowed to use the scan. So I scan a predetermined thing on the wall.
Looks like the cult uses tattoos to show off their ranks.
And then have to scan another thing.
Supposed to be a good thing or a bad thing?
How does any of that look good?
And then another thing, in a game mechanic that can only be described as follow the beep until green. Then, my NPC companion solves the puzzle for me and tells me to randomly look for certain tattoo, which I can do by walking and pressing triangle at marked enemies at random. Amazing game design, I know. It's so immersive and full of player agency. Here another mission. Here I have to help this guy invite his boyfriend to the homecoming dance. So intro cutscene, then follow marker. Now I have to either stealth by exploiting my webline, highest difficulty by the way, or fight by exploiting my output. Then a cutscene,
Yeah, about that. I'd love to deliver this thing, but those idiots already did so much damage. If she's salvageable, it'll take weeks of repairs. Mind delivering bad news for me?
followed by a marker to go to. I arrive at the marker and have to follow another marker. Now I'm up here, and here we find another fake puzzle. First of all, systemic interactions do not exist, of course, which means my core mechanics will go unused again. Do you wonder why my reticle locks onto these electrical thingies here? Maybe you think I have to shoot at them. But if I do, nothing happens. Remember that for later. My objective is to activate this generator here. And how did I find this generator? Simply by the developers using good graphics design to make it stand out enough to be a natural point of interest maybe. Of course not, that would go against the spiral of crappiness. I found it by the developers allowing me to use this scan ability again, which is not a core mechanic and only ever accessible to me when the developers tell me it is accessible and tell me which buttons to press. So I, quote, find the generator, and now, how do I activate it? I know, maybe I can use Miles' electric powers. Nope, can't do that, because that would mean core game mechanics would be used. And we can't have that now, can we? No. Instead, you have to stand at a certain spot and press a displayed button prompt. A spiral of crappiness.
Got the voltage we need.
And remember the electrical thingies that my aim snapped onto earlier? Well, now the developers allow me to use my web shooter to connect them with each other. Before, I was not allowed to, but now that the developers tell me in plain text to do it, I am allowed. Now let's compare this once again with Breath of the Wild. In Breath of the Wild, metallic objects can conduct electricity. And when I say metallic objects, I mean all of them. This includes my shields that I have in my inventory here. So even if I was super dumb and didn't notice all the objects the developers placed here to help me solve the puzzle with, I could still come up with my own weird way of almost cheating the system with my ingenuity. So I go into my backpack, drop my shields, and move them over to the conducting plates. I make them form a neat line. And da-da-da-da. Well, back to Spider-Man 2. So I connect these thingies to complete the puzzle. But as you can see, this isn't really a puzzle. It's a fake puzzle. There's basically only one way to connect these things.
Maybe I should go into
And I
electrical
see where
engineering.
they are by scanning with R3. Well, so I connect them the only way I
Maybe you should
can.
call yourself
And now a
Great
cutscene.
Electric Spider. Thanks. I like Spider-Man just fine. Oh, just got a text. He's on his way. Don't go just yet. I could still use your help. Just hi.
And of course, another marker. But why is there a triangle button? See, usually I can zip up to these poles by pressing L2 and R2 at the same time, or by aiming at them by holding L2 and pressing R2 to zip over. I can still do that with the light pole next to it, but not on this one that is marked with triangle. The developers really do everything in their power to make core game mechanics go unused in favor of context-sensitive button prompts. I really hope that this example hammers this home. Even this insignificant little interaction is restrictively designed. But okay, whatever. I go over there,
DJ's texting me. What? A whiteboard.
and now I have to flip over the whiteboard. How do I do that? Is there a core mechanic maybe that lets me pull stuff towards me? Nope, a context-sensitive L1 plus R1 prompt appears. But at least I have to make it all seem seamless so that the guy still has a fun experience and it's not ruined by him having to wait there or by me showing myself on accident, right? No, not right, of course not. Even if I try, I cannot be caught. I can try to purposefully jump in front of him, but the developers make me zip back to the pole automatically. I can also just wait here for hours if I wanted to, and nothing would happen. So basically, I cannot fail this. This entire sequence has no gameplay value, no game design value. It's not even a quick time event. It's a freaking slow time event. Well, after finally flipping the board, it points to the left to a movie poster. But oh no, the electronic trigger to release the next sign is stuck. I once again try to fail here, try to wait, and nothing happens. Until I cave in and press the predetermined buttons. Okay, fade to black, and now I'm here, stuck in this position. I can't move, jump, aim, shoot, nothing. I can barely move my camera. The only thing I can do now is again press the shown button prompt. I could again wait for hours and not fail this. These two would just stand there forever until I cave in and press the button prompt.
Oh, VJ of course. Best day ever. Anything for love, guys. Happy for you both. Enjoy homecoming.
And after another cutscene, the mission is over. Or let's look at this moment right here. I'm using the spider bot to stealth around the building. Notice how I have to distract this guy here in order to get through the hole in the wall unnoticed. So I just had to use the mechanic of scanning for an object, aiming at an object and then shooting at the object in order to distract someone. What do you think will happen once I get into the next room where another enemy is placed? Well, of course, the developers tell me to press R3 to scan for an object, right after I already did that just moments earlier. Which means that the players who play this mission already know how this works. Clearly, they have to know how it works, especially because this is not even a tutorial for distracting enemies, and it's not a tutorial for the spider bot either. And this time, using core mechanics is once again replaced by a context-sensitive interaction point, complete with a button prompt. In the same mission, my main objective is to follow wires and fixing electrical panels in order to restore the power. Right away, the developers tell me to scan for wires in the walls in order to follow them. So at this point in the mission, I already know this. This is how I found this very panel right here. But what happens after I have fixed this one? Well, of course, the developers tell me to press R3 to scan and follow wires. I am once again not allowed to use what I already learned on my own. The spiral of crappiness doesn't allow this. They don't trust me that I learned to scan for wires, even though I had to do it multiple times already. Now let's look at this pretty late mission here. I'm trapped in a room and I have to find multiple generators in order to get out of here. So I activate one after the other, and where's the last one? Oh, would you look at that? A pre-placed zip point by the developers. Once again, I'm not allowed to use my core mechanics. In this case, either crawling up the wall and then onto the ceiling, or aiming at the ceiling and pressing R2 to zip to it. Instead, the developers place a zip point there and tell me which buttons to press. Which also means that this is a button prompt followed by another button prompt, because as we already learned earlier, I'm not allowed to use my core mechanics, aka Miles' electrical powers, to activate generators, and instead have to look at them from a certain angle and follow a prompt. And if you ask me why I think that the zip point is placed here, I would guess that they did that because they simply cannot trust in their own ability to have taught you how to zip onto ceilings. Even by now, in this late game mission, they have so little trust in you, the player, to know this mechanic, and themselves as the game designers to have taught you the mechanic, that they still place zip points here. Also notice how this zip point turns me in the right direction automatically, in case the players are too dumb to understand that there's a generator right here. Or look at this right here. Button prompt, followed by QuickTime event. What gameplay value is this crap supposed to have exactly? Can anyone answer me that? Like, what are we doing here, Insomniac? What is this? Okay, one of the final comparisons to another game. This time, Batman Arkham City. This right here is the very beginning of the game. This is the first time you enter the open world, which is also why you will see tutorial button prompts. This isn't how the entire game is, but simply because this is literally the start of the game. Right at the moment you gain control of Batman, you notice a Riddler symbol in the distance. So of course, many players will be drawn towards it. As you approach it, you find a question mark inside a cage. And a trophy locked away under this little dome here. And you see that the dot of the question mark seems to be glowing. It must be a button. So without the developers saying a single word, again aside from the basic tutorial text on how to jump and glide because this is the beginning of the game, I now attempt to solve this puzzle. I immediately see that the only way into the cage seems to be this ventilation shaft. Maybe I can jump in there. That's a no. So now I'm thinking, maybe I can throw my Batarang in there. But no, it just crashes into the wall. Let's look into my inventory. And what do we have here? A remote-controlled Batarang. On my first try, I don't quite make it. But then I notice that I can slow down using the left trigger. And with that, I get around the corner and hit the button. The trophy is freed, and I solved my very first Riddler puzzle, all on my own. Again, what you saw here is more complex and requires more brain power than basically anything Spider-Man 2 has to offer, because Spider-Man 2 is just awfully designed in every regard. But this video is getting long enough. I hope I demonstrated why I'm of the opinion that this game is badly designed by now. You are not allowed to think. Every time you have to do anything, the developers tell you exactly which buttons to press, exactly where to go, lock away abilities from you, won't allow you to use systemic interactions and core mechanics, and force you to follow direct commands instead. The combat and stealth are both lackluster, whilst winging looks flashy and cool, but is half automated and is never used in interesting ways during missions. For a laugh, I will leave you with a short video I made on how Super Mario Bros. Wonder would be like if it was designed like Spider-Man 2. And with that, goodbye.
Hey, maybe there's more of these hidden in that block over there? Why to hit it more? These can't be all of them. Hey, look, this looks like the door door is split into 2 pieces. You need to get them back together again somehow. Oh, I know. Try moving these pink blocks. It seems the light defeats these ghastly enemies. I think you should use your fireballs to light the way and reveal invisible paths. Hey, Maria, you should try swinging over to that coin, using these weird-looking enemies here.